Hey, welcome back to the New Bold Oola Life channel. I'm your host, David Newbold, and today Ransom and I are talking about our families. So we've got some interesting stories. Let's get into it.
Let's get bold.
So as mentioned, I'm here today with my co-host Ransom Davenport, and we're going to be talking about family. So Ransom, do you want to start us off this time?
Yeah, man, I'll rock it out for us, okay? So we're talking about family. Oh my gosh, family is such a huge topic. And you know I've got interesting stories, so I'm going to just launch in with an interesting story. I've got a lot of interesting family members. But one that really stands out, I had a great aunt by the name of Margaret. Now, she was the youngest of 12 kids. She came at the very end of my family on the Davenport side. And what was cool about her, she was Aunt Margaret with a mullet. She literally had a mullet. And I remember one time talking to her son about it and everything. And he's a cousin of mine. I was like, well, you know, her hairstyle is kind of like this. And like, oh, he's a mullet. I'm like, what? He's like, no, she owns that. It's a mullet. And I'm like, okay, cool. So she was so sweet, but it's just one of those things that stands out about her. Aunt Margaret with a mullet. That's how I introduced people to tell them about that. So about that type of life. But I mean, you know about that, don't you? I mean, like, you've had some interesting family members with, interesting haircuts.
Okay, so you're talking about my grandfather. My grandfather had a military buzz cut his entire life till the time he passed away. And I mean, I think that was held over from he was lifelong in the Air Force, and actually back during World War II, he was a test pilot and a pilot trainer. And he has some crazy stories. Real quick, going on a little bit of a side story with him, there's a place in Florida off of one of the Air Force bases called Cobb's Overrun. And the reason for that is because as he was testing out an aircraft, one of the engines went out, and he had to basically crash land the aircraft. And so he's bringing it in, and the runway wasn't long enough for how quick he was coming in. And so he ended up having to basically skid over. And apparently around the time he was coming off the runway and going into a bunch of banana trees, this general happened to be driving up towards the area where, he was going to be reporting in. And so he's hitting these banana trees, and the aircraft is flying in and tilting up, and he's like, no. He's trying to keep the nose, up as much as possible, not to flip over. He manages to basically keep it from flipping completely over. It comes down, and he's cussing out, he had an interesting tongue, but he's cussing, yelling, and he's like, this runway is way too short, all this stuff. And the general walks up in the middle of the field, and he's like, are you all right? He's like, yeah, I'm all right. This stupid and so the general's like, okay, thank you, I'm glad you're okay. Come to find out, he transferred to another base and then eventually came back, and when he came back, he found out that they actually did end up extending that runway and called it Cobb's Overrun because of what had happened there. So that was an interesting little side story with my grandfather.
Well, since we're on the topic of grandparents, didn't you have a grandmother who did something astronomical that most people can't even say?
Yeah. So my grandmother, married to that grandfather, was the only female chemist on the Manhattan Project. So she worked with them on that, not knowing everything that was going on exactly. They knew it was part of the war effort, but they didn't have all the details of what exactly was going to happen. And when she found out after the war, she ended up going into pharmacy because she wanted to use chemistry to help people. But she was brilliant. So yeah, on that side of the family, had some really, really crazy, amazing stories. And then on the other side of my family, my other grandparents, much more at home. So my grandmother was a homebody, and my grandfather was an air conditioning and TV repairman. So very different dynamics, like traveling, doing crazy, historical stuff, and then doing like much more at home type of personalities. So a little bit of a diverse family background.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. But wasn't there something else about him? He wasn't just an HVAC guy or TV repairman. Wasn't he an entrepreneur?
Yeah, he was. I actually don't know as much about his background. My dad doesn't actually share a whole lot with me, but I do know, yeah, he was an entrepreneur himself as well.
Okay, cool. I thought I remembered that, so maybe I know more about your family than you do.
It's possible.
Possible. That's it. Well, so I'm sure you got to be wondering out there, people in Oola who are listening about Oola, like what is the whole part of family? What do you do with that F? Well, sometimes Oola is we look at relationships with families because they can be really amazing when they're amazing, or they can be really toxic. So sometimes you've got to look at those relationships and realize, is this beneficial? Do I need to distance myself from that? Do I need to perhaps, well, like in your case, like sometimes our family is amazing, but there's missing parts and pieces. We have to either adopt a family members, or get adopted by a family. You know where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
You got to tell them about the Callahans. They're awesome.
Okay. So my best friend is Andrew Callahan, and so we are such close friends that he's actually my brother now. Of course, Ransom got married into the family and became my brother, but Andy and Jay, his younger brother, are both my brothers because they're that close. We don't actually catch up quite as frequently as I would like, but we still keep in contact all the time. And yeah, his family has kind of adopted me. And actually, his dad taught me a number of things. For example, my own dad didn't really teach me to shave, or he basically was like, oh yeah, you just take a razor to it. But there were like areas that I didn't even know you needed to shave or whatever. And so yeah, Mr. Callahan was the one who was like, oh yeah, you need to hit here. And he showed me a number of things that I didn't get to learn from my own family. And so I've been kind of adopted into their family, and yeah, we're super close. I love it. And basically, even though we don't keep in contact as much as might be good, it doesn't matter. I could probably wait a year and then we'd pick up where we left off, and nothing be different really. So,
dude, that is so Oola. That is so balanced, isn't it?
Sure, yeah. It's great to have, and indeed, it is perhaps more, or it's definitely more balanced than having any toxic relationships like that.
I agree, man. I don't know. I just think we just brought it. I just don't know if we could add more value than we just did. Jokingly.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
anything,
then. Huh?
Anything you would add to it?
Well, basically, I would just say that, yeah, perhaps if you do have a toxic relationship with a family member, I actually do have a family member that I'm not going to mention in case they somehow watch this at some point, but I have intentionally distanced myself from them a bit because I know they are a toxic influence with me. So when it comes to family, I realize that sometimes you can't distance yourself from them very much. You have to interact, like, Thanksgiving or whatever, when you do meet with each other, but realizing that those relationships are important, but you limit your exposure to those. And then, yes, you cherish the amazing, wonderful relationships you have with the rest of your family. So that would be where I would put the center of mass for a family.
I love it, man. It's normally me doing all the talking. Well,
Yep, this is true. All right, but yeah, that's where we're gonna call it today. Thank you guys so much for hanging out, and I'll now on to the outro. And that's it this time. Next week, we'll be back with another of the Oola F's, finance. To be sure that you catch it, go ahead and smash that subscribe button. We'd love to hear your thoughts and questions in the comments below, so share those with us. And until next time, remember to seek new challenges, make bold choices, and keep it balanced. Cheers.